Yeah, one of the occasions I remember from the 1960s, Rodney, was the amazing local derbies with Cambridge City. The enormous crowd you had there, and the real rivalry between the two, not only between the clubs but between the supporters as well. What do you remember about those matches, and does one stand out in your mind? I know what you're going to say.
Well, I think what he's getting at, as you all know, I've played down Cambridge City in front of 10,000 for the CAMS Professional Cup. You know, so that's the sort of gates you all know we was getting. When we played them down there one night, and that was in the FA Cup, we was drawing 1-1, and they had a penalty, and a boy called Banks, who went to Exeter, a very good player, Alan Banks, yeah. Because I think when I first came to Cambridge City was obviously the better side. There's no two ways about that. They were a very, very good side, and they had the best pitch as well. But we were playing them this night, and it was 1-1, 2 or 3 minutes to go, and they had a penalty, and Banksy, Reg Pearce, still lives in Cambridge. Reg was a bit of a stutterer, poor old Reg, and he couldn't help, obviously couldn't help that. But so I looked at Reg and I said, like that, you know, made out I was taking the mickey, like, and I said, I know, like that. And he said, you don't, he said. So anyway, he did. He put it to my best side again. I'm surprised at Reg because he took a lot of penalties against me, and I happened to save it. And there was only about 3 minutes to go, and this was in the cup. And we had a replay. We won 1-1. But anyway, when I was coming off the pitch, people was coming up to me and, you know, saying, "Oh, well done, Rod, and good save," all this and that. So I said, "Oh, thank you." And 2 other boys and a man came towards me, and I thought they were going to say the same thing. You see, I thought they were going to say, "Oh, well done, Rod," because I thought they were United supporters. Instead of that, one hit me so hard, he hit me in the eye, and he cut my eye open and knocked me on the floor. And the police, in those days, you only had 5 or 6 coppers, didn't you, really, at a match? Even here at Cambridge United, you only had 5 or 6 policemen to look after the crowds, and there was big crowds as well. Anyway, they came over. When I got back into the dressing room, they came in, and Mr. Greenwood, who was their chairman, he said, "We got the man, would you like to silence him?" I said, "Oh no," I said, because I thought, well, next time I go down Cambridge City, look what's going to be like for me, you know, if I cause any trouble, which he had done for me, because my eye was starting to swell up. So I remember that match against the City very much for what he'd done to me, and I think the wife thought I'd been boxing that night instead of playing football. But we played them out here, and we lost 2-1 in the replay. That was a Thursday afternoon when we had to play our games because we had no floodlights. The only floodlights we had, which I played the second half under here, was 3 poles down each side, as you well know, 3 telegraph poles with 3 lights on each pole. So that's 9 lights each side of the ground. And I played second halves under them on a Saturday afternoon. So no wonder I've got eyes like an owl, you know. But we had some good games against Cambridge City, and before Elizabeth Way was open, you only had to go down Victoria Avenue. Is it Victoria Avenue is the first road? And you had to go 2 hours before the kick-off because you couldn't just go down. It was just chock-a-block. They were good, very good, because the players, we took it in, although it was a bit fierce rivalry here and there, but the supporters, they told me that Marshall's on a Monday morning, I don't know if there's anybody who works here in Marshall's, but they told me that Marshall's never got no work done on a Monday when Cambridge United and Cambridge City played, because they were discussing the game all the time, so they never do any work on a Monday.
Well, it wasn't that match I thought you'd talk about, but I was wondering, do you remember one where there was a bit of trouble?
Oh, when they abandoned it. I was going to bring it out, yes. We had a chappie, Di Ward, Welsh boy, Welsh international and all Di was. You see, that's the sort of blokes. There was getting to come to sign for Cambridge at the time was unheard of, really. You know, players of that calibre. But yeah, he came and played for us, but he was a bit fiery, Di was. And down the bottom end, Newmarket Road end, I think that's when, before he was chairman and he worked for the gas board, Mr. Smart, that's when his dad got into trouble, I think, because there was an almighty tangle in the goalmouth there. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, so, yeah.
Yeah, and so the referee decided that it was a cup game, that was a cup game, and he decided to abandon the game. But we won the replay. But yeah, that was a bit of rivalry, and that all started behind the goal. Which I understand now you can't stand near the wall now behind the goal, is that right? Whereas before, you know, you used to sit on there, didn't you? No wall, but anyway, that's how it's changed today.
Rodney, can I just ask you, do you know why in your time when you was playing, the attendances were so much better? Both home and away we could draw 8,000 people. In your opinion, why do you think that support is now lacking?
Well, if you only got to take today, aren't you, really? Those who didn't come today missed 5 goals, didn't they? You know, I'm talking about this game today. Those who didn't come missed 5 goals and a jolly good game. The reason being, what was it? On Sky Television. You see, and if it wasn't all that good a day for a start, was it? So you can get people to decide, I'm going to stay in because it's on the television. You see, when I was playing and we was getting, I mean, if we played, for instance, Romford, I mean, what's Romford in the, I don't know what league, they're not in a very high league now, Romford, but when Romford played here, we was getting 6,000 and 7,000. I mean, it's incredible. Clubs like that was bringing in for the club, you know, 6,000 and 7,000. Now, there wasn't nothing on the television. There were no Sky Sports. There was no sport on the television, was there? Today, there's nothing you can turn on the television. Is either, if you like cycling, there's cycling on every minute, as in the Sky Sports. There's football on, there's cricket on, and I think that is what's ruined the real life, people coming to real life. And plus the fact, I always said, I'm not a Cambridge person, but I've been here since 1962, so I do class myself as a Cambridge person now, because I've stayed here and I only live across the road. So I think a lot of it is that there's so much free sport in Cambridge, where it's pretty high class, whatever you want to go and, you know, squash, rugby, you can all go there and it's all free. I think that's the trouble with Cambridge. I think it's always been the same, that it's too much free sport, you know. Plus the fact the television is definitely done attendances. Now, because if it had been raining today, obviously a lot of you probably, or you wouldn't, because you wouldn't have been sitting here if you weren't keen, so you'd have been here, but a lot of people wouldn't have come today, that was out there today in that 4,500. I don't think they would have come if it had been raining, because it was on the television, you know, and they'd have sat there and watched it and had a cup of tea.
Can I ask a very quick question? I remember seeing you play a few times, but I don't... Thank you. I remember seeing you play a few times, but modern goalies now have always wear gloves, don't they? Did you ever wear gloves? I don't ever recalling you wearing gloves, and the balls had those laces down them. Must have been pretty painful, wasn't it?
Well, like I told you earlier on, when I was at Leicester, Gordon Banks and myself, a lady in Leicester used to crochet our gloves that we used to wear just for when the ball was wet. We never did. I can't get over to my grandchildren either, and one of my grandchildren is a goalkeeper, and that's what he does, and he can't get over that I never wore gloves when the ball was dry, for instance. Like you said, I never wore gloves, and I very rarely wore them when it wasn't raining. If it was a little bit damp, I still never wore gloves, because it was unheard of in those days. But we used to have a lady in Leicester who used to crochet our gloves for when it was wet. And I remember coming back here to Cambridge, well, I don't know, come back, I was here, and I was asked to play in a charity game. Bobby Robson, the one who died of the illness, don't you? Well, he'd got a team up, and I was asked to play in this with Sean Connery and all these people. You know, we had a good, nice time. But anyway, I was asked to play in this game, and there was a goalkeeper here, as you all know, Malcolm Webster. And I said to Malcolm, Malcolm, can I borrow a pair of your gloves? And he said, yeah, of course you can, Rod. So anyway, I borrowed this pair of gloves of Malcolm's, and I just could not believe it, honestly. I couldn't drop the ball. I mean, no, I couldn't. They're wash leathers, aren't they? Have you seen goalkeepers? Today's gloves, they're like wash leathers. And I just couldn't help it. I couldn't believe how nice they were, and it was a wet night, so I just couldn't believe it, how I'd gone through all my career. Even when I finished in 1973, I finished at Bury St Edmunds. I still never wore gloves on a dry day or partly wet ball. And plus the fact, in those days, the old ball, when I first started, got heavier and heavier, as the older generation will know. If it was raining that day, by half time you can hardly pick it up. I only kick it, but and it hurt as well if it hit you where it shouldn't have done. And oh dear, and we was always taught to breathe in when you catch the ball, and sometimes if you didn't, poof. But no, I like today. I mean, I'd love to have played with the footballs they've got today. You know, I must stick up for the goalkeepers here. I think the ball does move a little bit for them. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes when it's coming towards them, you see it move, and especially on the television. And I think that's difficult today for the goalkeepers. Like the boy who hit the bar today. When I bet you when that left his foot, that moved like that when it hit the crossbar. There's no two ways about it. I wouldn't like that, but at least it was too heavy to move when I played. But I think they've got it a little bit better today, although I think it's harder to become a professional, because when I started at Leicester and we had team photograph at the beginning of the season, there'd be 5 to 6 goalkeepers of us in the team photograph and about 45 players on the picture. I mean, today you'd probably only get 25 to 30, wouldn't you? You know, and they call it squads these days. So I think it's harder for a young lad to make it today, but in the other hand, he's got a better chance than say I did, because I did my training from I told you I was a messenger boy, and at night, so I used to go into Peterborough, the town of Peterborough, and I lived 3.5 miles from there, a little village, and I used to go into Peterborough and under the lights of the park, and that's where I'd done my training. You know, that's the sort of facilities I had for training, in a public park with the street lights, and that's how we did our training. So today they got, you know, they go to these nice floodlights and God knows what. They got it a lot better than we had, but I still think it's harder for them to make the grade, you know. That's the unfortunate thing today.
Thank you. We've got a question over here from Barry.
Hi Rod.
Hello.
Who were your footballing idols, heroes, when you were growing up? And another quick one, did you always want to be a goalkeeper?
Well, my hero was, once again, the young ones won't remember him, but he played for Wolverhampton Wanderers, goalkeeper Bert Williams. You probably won't remember him, but he was my hero, Bert Williams, and I liked the boy that Bill Levers played with, Bert Trautmann, the German goalkeeper, when he broke his neck in the cup final. Can you imagine playing on with that like he did? But anyway, I started as a forward actually, because I liked scoring goals, but and I only went in goal when, as I said, when a player got injured. But then from then onwards, I thought, "Cool, this is a lot better." Especially a lot when I come here, I thought, "Oh, this is all right." I mean, they're all running around like that, and all I'm doing is diving about, you know. That was lovely. I thought that was brilliant. I did. So I wanted to train. Don't get me wrong. I was always the last one to go away, and I would never let them ever let the forwards leave Coldham's Common in the morning, I would never ever let them leave after all the others are gone without giving me half an hour of just shooting. And I used to have them each side of the goal, so I didn't have to run fetch it. So there was some that side of the goal and some this side with no nets up. And then I used to make them give me half an hour of shooting at me to make me dive and save it. And I did that every solid day on Coldham's Common, because I wanted the agility, you see, because I wasn't very big. So I had to make up for something. So.
Another question in the front row here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
It's grandson.
Hello, Grandad.
See how old I am.
You said earlier you won Fans Player of the Year 3 times, but who was the best player you played with at Cambridge United?
I don't know, yeah. There was one or two good players I had here at Cambridge United. There's a little boy I mentioned, I think, earlier, a boy called Jackie Skur. These are all players, don't forget, that's come from league clubs. Jackie Skur, as I said, I wouldn't have liked to have played against him, because he was a Cambridge United man, where regardless of, you know, what they say about players, in them days, Jack was here for 5 years, lived at the corner there in Elfrida. He was a little terrier, so I would think he was as good as any. A chap, I like Roy Kirk. He became assistant manager here. Eventually, Roy Kirk, he came from Coventry. He'd come here, he was already here when I got here. He was a very, very good centre half, he was. I liked him big in front of me, you see, because I was only a tiny one. But that, I think I was very lucky, like I said to you. I mean, I got a lot of credit for a lot of things at Cambridge, but I've got to remember, you've got to remember, the boys in front of me was very good players, and we were full-time. We outplayed a lot of teams like Weymouths and Bath City. I mean, that don't seem a lot, but they had players from Sunderland. They had 3 players, Fleming, a boy called Fleming, who had the hardest shot in football. I mean, in professional football, they had such as him. Eventually, he went down and played for them. So, I think I was very lucky to have players of that calibre in front of me. And I think, as I said, Roy Kirk, Jackie Skur, and Jerry Baker, and the boy that's been here today, apparently he's a season ticket, lives at Goulston, Brian Boggis. Yeah, Brian Boggis. See, they were all good little players. Not very big, Brian wasn't, but he always used to stick up for me, he did, if he was in trouble. He wasn't very big either, but he was a Goulston boy.
Thank you. Tom, you got one?
Oh yeah, definitely. Rodney, without looking at the door, can you tell us who was the best chairman in your time at Cambridge United?
Chairman?
Chairman, yeah.
Well, I think I've got to say Mr. Woolley, Abbey Tyres. He was the chairman for the longest here, and then Mr. Proctor, who had a small shop up the road, he became chairman. But I think Mr. Woolley, you've got to remember, I think now, the people on the board now, and I hope they're not in here, but they're very hard workers. They're very hard workers, and you've got to remember here at Cambridge, you've recovered in the last 2 or 3 years. I haven't been to a lot of your games, and I'm honest here because of my grandson, who's 20 odd and played for Sudbury, and so I've been following him on a Saturday, so I haven't been here. Now he's in Australia coaching in cricket, so he's having a right old life, isn't he? But the thing is, I think 2 or 3 years ago we got let down a little bit at Cambridge United, but I think now who's there then? You've got the right people now, what I can gather, in the club. I think we're very lucky. You people that do all this for Coconuts, all this helps to provide a family atmosphere in your club. And you cannot beat the family atmosphere. I told you before how we used to go as players and be with supporters all Saturday night. We used to go up to Marshall's, to their social club. all the players, we used to gather up there. If we didn't come back here to the supporters club, we'd go up to Marshall's and there'd be entertainment on there, and we'd all be with the supporters. And I think now, we lost that, a few years ago, but now I think you're very, very lucky that, what I know anyway, the people that's in charge now, Cambridge through and through, and we're all very lucky, not just you, but me. I mean, you come to the matches more than I do, so I've got to say you. You're very lucky you've got hard-working people that's not just put money in to see what they can get out, they're putting the work in, and this has proved it, isn't it now? You're back in the league. We worked hard. I mean, that was my worst ever thing happened to me at Cambridge, that Bill Levers didn't keep me to play in the league, because I'd stayed here 9 years to help Cambridge to get in the league. And I wanted to play in the league for Cambridge. I played in the league, don't get me wrong, for Leicester and QPR, but I wanted to play in the league for Cambridge. And for me, to pull that paper out of the letterbox at Lloyd's Bank on Mitcham's Corner that night and see that it's got on the back page, Rodney Slack, Cambridge United's long-serving goalkeeper, sacked. That's the first I knew of it. And I came home, I went home and I said to the missus, I'm out of a job. I mean, you wonder why I didn't really, I had something against him as such really after I'd left, because that wasn't the right thing to do. Now, after I'd given 9 years and also played when I shouldn't have done. Because to be perfectly honest with you, if you're out there, you're fit. Whether you've got a broken leg or what, you're fit. You shouldn't play if you're not fit, and that goes to all these youngsters. They don't want to play if they're not fit, because you'll still get the blame. And I mean, I played against Wimbledon and lost us the game, Cambridge United. We lost 1-0 and I chucked the goal in. As the trainer at Leicester had used to say, he threw it in for safety. That's what meant I made a mistake. If he went back to Bankshin on a Monday and said, yeah, Rodney threw one in for safety, you knew what that meant, that it was me to blame. So, now I think here, as I say, look at this place, for instance, we're all enjoying, I hope you have, you've enjoyed the game, you're in it now, and if it weren't for you people that do it, coconuts and all this and that, it wouldn't be a family, it wouldn't help the club to be a family atmosphere. I just hope, because I don't know, because as I said, I don't come to every game, I just hope the players do mix in with you all, and that's what will help the club, because certainly your directors and your people behind the scenes are doing, they're putting it into a family, and that's what you've got to have. You've got to have that. You all got jobs, I hope, and unless you're retired like me, but if you've got jobs, you can't do your job properly if you don't enjoy doing it, and the only way to enjoy doing it is all pulled together, and that's what they've done here, hasn't they? You're back in the league, that's what you set out to do, and brilliant. I think it's brilliant. Sky Television today.
Yeah. I think we'll take one more question, please. Oh, is Alan again? Okay.
Can't keep on
And then after this question, we'll do the raffle draw, and then you'll be able to have a look at the polo shirts and so on.
Rodney, you were understudy to Gordon Banks. What sort of memories have you got of Gordon himself?
Well, he was I think that's why he was a good goalkeeper, Gordon, because he was such a lovable chap. We had the Scottish international trainer as our trainer at Leicester City, and we used to go to a place just outside of Leicester to do training, Bradgate Park, and we used to go there, do a lot of training, and some days the trainer, this international trainer, would say, right lads, I want you all to devise a routine, a training routine. And when it come to Gordon, we'd all done various things with the players. I forget what mine was. I was probably up there like that. That's all we did in those days, up forward, back. So anyway, I said to Gordon, right Gordon, what's yours? So he said, right. So we was all expecting, he'd just come back off international duty, or Right, lay down, he said. So we all laid down on this wet grass at Bradgate Park. On your backs, legs out straight, eyes closed, and of course we was, whatever's gonna... Eyelids raised, lower. Of course he got into trouble for that, but he got away with it being Gordon as Gordon. But yeah, we all burst out laughing because we thought it was going to be a strenuous one, but instead of that it was eyelids raised, lower. But no, Gordon was, years ago there used to be a comedian come on the television making it, he was drunk with a cigarette in his mouth. I think Jimmy somebody or whatever his name is. He'd come in, didn't he, and make out he was drunk. Well, Gordon could take him off. And I've seen him do two of the directors who thought he was drunk and reported him. Yeah, he come in one day and he was staggering like that and he messing about like that. And he got into, you know, he got these two directors, went off and called the manager in his office, Mr. Gillis, manager, and yeah, they thought Gordon were drunk, but we weren't allowed. The only thing we was allowed to drink at Leicester, obviously I was never allowed this is not drink, motorbike. I was never allowed, footballers are not allowed motorbikes, so I don't think it's changed now. My insurance was more than anybody else's because they classed us as jockeys, you know, in the same class as jockeys, so my car insurance was a lot more expensive, so obviously you put your mum and dad's who lived in a little village, you know, you put their addresses and things like that. So that went against us, but on the other hand, there was lots of things, like if I wanted a car, I always got a decent car. I had to pay for it, but it was always a decent car, do you know what I mean? Because I could give them a ticket or two to come here, couldn't I? So that was good. I loved being a footballer anyway. I loved it. I've only had the 2 jobs in the fire service, and I had 20 odd years in there, and they looked after me in there, bless their hearts, and the football. So if you ask any of these young lads what 2 jobs they'd like all their life, that's what they'd come up with: fireman and a footballer. What more do you want? Anyway, if this is the last question, I'd like to say thank you very much for your being here, and I'll pass you over to
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us, saying it's been a real treat and a real pleasure and an honour to have you here today, Rodney, and thanks for fielding all those questions. Thanks for being here. Once more, your appreciation please for a legendary man, Rodney Stack.